Thank you for all of your interesting presentation. Now I will have some questions for you guys about open banking, and then after the open banking panel session, everyone that wants to ask anything, any of our guests, please don't hesitate. I will start. You all have microphones, more or less. Okay, you can share. Okay, so the first question is very general, just to warm up a little bit. What is PSD2 and open banking from your perspective, from the perspective of your business? What type of opportunities and maybe also challenges that brings for your organization? And we can start, I don't know, from this side, because this is the question for everyone. Krzysztof.
Thank you.
Please focus on the opportunities.
Yeah, I'm
for
just,
Alior.
yes, because it's a big topic. Well, in general, if just looking back, I think the good thing about the whole thing is that because of the regulations, the banks had to start thinking about open banking. Because like 2 years ago, PSD2 was sorry, because I have the sun in my eyes. PSD2 was something new, and when I was talking to people from various areas of the bank, I had to explain what are APIs, what kind of services will be have to be published, and so on and so on. So the good thing is that this kind of initiate the whole thinking about open banking. It kind of forced the banks to invest in infrastructure, in building the services, but we should treat it as just like a first chapter of the whole journey, because yes, all the banks should be now compliant by the 14th of September, and they should have the APIs in production with sandboxes early on. But now it is actually the interesting part, because up to now it was very hard work to make sure we meet the deadlines, but now we have to think of great ways to use those opportunities and build on top of that. So to me, that is like just the beginning of the journey, but with the compliance part being the kind of initiation of the whole journey. Did I answer your question?
More or less.
Yes. Okay.
You gave the space to other participants,
Yes,
so
sorry,
that's good.
if I'm speaking too long, then just interrupt.
It's okay, and we will take care of the sun, I hope, in the meantime. Thank you. Yeah, Boyan.
No more sun. Okay. So with regards to our business, as we pretty much target affluent customers, which means we are more interested in their saving accounts or investments, not that into payment accounts. I think under the current scope, we are probably doing just some sort of integration so the customer can check his O accounts, initiate payments to his Raisin account, of course. But this is, I wouldn't think it would be a game changer for us. To be just nice to have. And yeah, looking forward to next steps of open banking regulation, but right now it's just that.
Okay. Sergey.
Yeah, I'm representing in the IT sector, but I'm dealing with a huge number of banks, and I see how the APIs open banking are changing their minds. So first of all, the speed of the delivery of the value to the market. The second one is attitude towards customer support. So when you face your customer face by face in your branch, or you can call directly the customer, ask them something to provide additional information, correct something in the payment or in the documents. Using the open banking, you can receive thousands of requests per minute. You are not able to answer support tickets for weeks, for days, or answer additional questions. And while we are now familiar with the advertising, it is everywhere, in web, in mobile, on TV, on the street. The same will be with the banking, using the open banking. But not the advertising, but the ability to use the services. Somebody faced the Open API and PSD2 directive, the possibility for fintechs to overcome the classic banking and to kill the banks. Yeah, so we've heard such phrases from time to time during the period of time, maybe for 5 years. But the banks are very stable and they provide one of the major value that is lacked by fintech. This is security and the deep knowledge of the customers for years. So open banking, while you are able to expand your business, you are also able to expand the values you are bringing to the customers. That's it.
Do you think banks know what to do with open banking perspective, or except from the compliance part of view, is also this creating opportunities? The bank is a big organization, and it seems that it's hard for them to monetize the data that they already have, and now they have more of the data, and it's even bigger challenge to be faster than fintechs.
I'm sure that the banks are fully compliant with the possibilities that the open banking allow to have at all. The main question is the expenses for the solutions, and not for the APIs, but for the changes in the out-of-date co-banking and other solutions, back-office solutions. Because in API and the delivery of value and services using the modern techniques, one of the major topics is the time of the change. So if you are able to make experiments and the change interactions using Agile or any other methodologies very quick, you are able to receive the full value from the open banking. But in order to make the change inside the bank, you must be able to change your procedures, your processes, and the working of your back office techniques.
And have a lot of IT resources.
Not always. Not always. This is. I saw different types of projects. In some banks, they invest in a lot in IT. Some banks are investing a lot in changing internal procedures and processes. And as the rivals, they're at the same pace, because not everything can be covered by the money. You have to work on your internal efficiency at first, and then add additionally some IT resources to the result.
Thanks. Yeah, Bartosz?
Okay, thank you for the question. From my experience, the PSD2 came as a reinforcement, if you will, for the trend of economic banking, open banking, and the digital transformation trend that has started a little earlier. And while we were preaching innovation and digital transformation around with our customers, banks included, at time before PSD2, we had to face a major objective challenge coming from our counterparts, if you will, which was, well, guys, we'll never have IT priorities to get that done. That was pure that simple. And then the regulator came with the idea, you guys have to put your IT into places, you give it a higher priority, you give it a top priority, actually, because this becomes a regulatory project. It's no longer a business project, it's no longer nice to have, it's no longer has to be justified with the powerful business cases, because you have to prove to your investment committee it has to bring money, and now it's a regulatory project. You do it or you get punished. And this is, interestingly enough, in the big corporate world, best motivation to get things done quickly. So surprisingly enough, we are now meeting our customers and we hear, oh, lovely, we have our APIs, what can we do with them? Because now the story is kind of reversed. Now you guys have invested lots of money in actually getting your job done with APIs and what have you, with procurement, with all the systems being in place. You had to cut your banks from silos into something that becomes responsive to any kind of interaction with an external world. And now you have a challenge because you know how much you've spent on this and you want to monetize it. And therefore, you're looking for opportunities. And then you're opening your eyes and asking your partners, your customers, hey guys, what can we do with that to make your life easier? Therefore, we make more money.
Just like Krzysztof said, it's just the beginning of the journey.
Certainly, as I said, it's an important step in the longer trend, which is at the end reaching towards being able to quickly create more or less structured ecosystems of services where banks become partners with other companies that are creating different areas of values, so that together you are, with your power of your customer bases, with the power of your channels, you can easily mix and match with other companies that excel in doing whatever they are doing to provide the best value to your customers. Because on the other hand, what's the alternative to your customers? They would subscribe to Apples and Googles and Amazons and Alibabas and whoever else, because what is the flip coin of the PSD2 regulation is that these companies have been now enabled to access your databases and your information about what is the most valuable, which is your customers. And then if they're able to jump on that quickly enough, and they're able to convince your customers to give them consents to get to those data, your opportunities become somehow limited. Yes, and then you guys know very well what's the story behind Apple Card. Apple did that to just make sure that nobody leaves for Samsung or Google or Android ecosystem. And they would do that the same with your customers once they settle better in the area of payments and financial services once they get there.
Thank you. Konrad, Magda.
Well, I would like to repeat once again, we are at the beginning of the journey. And opportunities, it's not something that lie here and now that you can just take the white papers and then implement it. Opportunities are created right now, here. And the places like this, and situations like this, when we as banks meet fintechs, meet third-party providers, and most of all, meet our clients like you, like SMEs, and we have the opportunity to listen to the voice of the customer, and after getting this knowledge, creating products that will fit your needs. These are the opportunities that are created. But PSD2 is a regulatory obligation for banks. It is not an opportunity. It is a project of the legal on the legal scope. When we talk about opportunities, it is only about open banking. It is beyond PSD2. Magda?
I just wanted to add that being the part of the digital transformation team, we are still looking for new extraordinary products and services for our client. But we still don't see any interesting and nice solution for usage Polish API. So still, the main and the gold question is how to monetize the API.
Yes, true. And looking from the customer perspective now, because we just learn how you as an organization look at opportunities and challenges, and definitely there are a lot of challenges except from the opportunities that are a little bit blurred still. But from the customer point of view, if you could share, what do you think? Because they say that open banking is a win-win-win. First win is fintech, second banks, and the third, the greatest, is the customer. Is the customer really the winner? What exactly does he win? What's the opportunities? What are the opportunities? And what are the threats? What are the risks of the PSD2 being fully implemented and being used by a lot of fintechs that will emerge right now, I guess? And it's also the question for everyone, another warming up question. Maybe let's start from the other side this time. So Magda, Konrad, please share your opinion.
So this time I will
and please
represent
focus on
both of us.
SMEs.
Yes. As for threats, still we have the strong customer authentication, that's true. from the one hand, but on the other hand, we have to open our data and our services to unlimited number of external institutions. Of course, these are regulated institutions, but still, when we think of bank as a house with doors and windows, then the strong customer to take a STA, yeah, is like making banks installing 3 locks in their doors, but at the same time having infinite number of windows without really controlling them, right? So well, this is a kind of threat that always existed, and I think that it will always exist because there are a lot of fraudulent companies, fraudulent, I don't know who should I say institutions, but generally people that would love to have your money, and they will use every possible opportunity to get them. The conclusion is that no matter is the STA implemented, how it is implemented, you as customers should always stay alert and cautious within disposing of your data, your banking data, your financial products within the banks.
Yeah. Bartosz, what do you think about this?
Okay, so let me get back to the concept of consumers and opportunities. So it's quite often when I hear people talking open banking, they tend to lean more towards fintech and banks, and they tend to leave customers alone a little. At least that's my impression. And what it leads to is that actually it's a recipe for a failure of any venture you can think of. Because 8 out of 10 ventures and fintech and creative ideas fail because ultimately somebody has forgotten about the customers. So those that will eventually pay for that. What happens is that, and that's the whole challenge, while we are so busy talking API standards, etc., we tend to spend less time on considering ways how the customer will benefit that. And this is really the challenge to balance that out, because obviously making more space for entrance for different partners, for different parties, obviously means there is more people to share the cake, and therefore your business cases have to be strong enough not only to handle your cost of capital and your cost of services and maintenance and what have you, but there has to be something left for that third party, that these are the people that need to feed their children as well, right? So that puts even higher pressure on margins that would eventually be paid by end customers, and the question is, and the difficult question is, how much the customer can stand. Or in other words, you are trying to facilitate something for them, you are trying to bring all his accounts into one place, for instance, in the regular personal finance organizer. Or you're trying to facilitate his job getting a loan. That's nice. But are you able to set up a model that is efficient and economically enough to convince the guy that it's worth it for him? And luckily for us, the open banking doctrine, if you will, says yes, there is a way, and the way is the platform economy. So really ability of the ecosystem to set up somebody to really put things in practice in the way that economies of scale could be applied. Because only then, chances are, everybody would only contribute with their relevant assets, not necessarily throwing their overhead costs on top, so that it becomes economically feasible not only to develop the platform, but also launch it. Because at the end of the day, somebody has to convince customers to give their consents, to start to use the new service. And from that perspective, in my opinion, those open banking ventures are even more difficult than the traditional, or should I say, old-fashioned ways of setting up partnerships between corporates and other small companies, where the objective seemed a little bit more clear, and the need was certainly much more obvious. But we are in times where the standards are just about to settle a little. There is still plenty of questions and anxiety around, let alone EBA interpretation of their own regulations in the end. But it's a good time for storming, and we are sure at the heart that there will be some very interesting disruptive initiatives coming from there, because there is a lot of brain power on the market focused on how do we make money on this, and especially that the market and the banks in particular, having invested so much, are very receptive to looking for ways to monetize that.
Thank you.
Yeah, for me as a representative of SME business, and from my perspective as an SME customer and a private individual customer, I think that I'm waiting and I'm willing to have, and I think that the next one competition will be in the competition of ecosystems. So open banking and API allow to create ecosystems or inside the bank, between the bank and other partners, and ecosystems that could be used to promote additional value and receive additional money, of course. So that is how it can be monetized. So nobody has the value of, for example, merging in 5 or 7 different accounts, cut debit cards, credit cards in one application. What's the sake? I won't pay for such an application because I'm using 2 or 3 banks, because I'm consuming some services from their side. And if the bank is going to provide an ecosystem of services for me, I'm going to use it more and more. Let's look on Apple and Google. So they are now entering the banking sphere. Google Pay, Apple Card, but we all are inside the ecosystems. So who has got the Apple iPhone? Please raise your hands. Maybe an Android phone? Also please raise your hand. Everybody is inside 2 ecosystems. As a guy from IT, I am in both. Yeah, I've got both, an iPhone and Android phone. The same, it will be the same. So the ecosystems are going to enlarge, and we will face huge ecosystems made by huge and large banks and niche players. Of course, there are going to be niche players like Revolt, yes, like N26. What are they providing? They're providing the same service with a rather special advertisement and a special delivery process. So are they successful? I'm not sure, because for how long they're working on the market, and for how long the majority of the banks who are presented here are working on the market. Let's compare the results. Are they growing fast? Yes, but try to look at the App Store or Google Play and you will find a lot of applications that are growing much faster. Is it a successful model? I don't know right now. Maybe 10 or 15 years will show us.
We'll see, yeah.
I'm wondering where to start after all speakers, but if I have to speak about the risks, the biggest risk I see, by the way, is that it's taking too long time, by the way, because everybody's saying we're just in the beginning of the journey, but this journey has been here for like 5 or 6 years from the first draft of PSD2, and still I think there is certain, I don't know, deficit in terms of real business case. I mean, the APIs are live, ready. Happy to hear the feedback from banks, how many actually API providers have accessed, used, offered some meaningful product. I'm a bit skeptical, but so I think the really low speed is the biggest problem in terms of open banking, in terms of offering really meaningful products to customers. Speaking of opportunities, I think although PSD2 is slow and painful, still I think there are banks like challenger banks are finally focusing on SME sector as well, because everybody starts with retail, seems easy, seems more natural, and of course the retail is easier market online, because how many SMEs are really online? It's hard market, but first challenger banks are focusing on SME, so providing hopefully better services. Hopefully PSD2 will provide for some additional services. Also, I don't see huge value. I won't probably pay €100 to have like all my accounts on one place, but anyway, it's maybe cool service. Yeah, looking forward to more and more services that actually add value on top of open banking for the customers.
Thank you. Last but not least, Krzysztof, I'm sure you can
You
add
sure?
something.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of something that wouldn't repeat the previous panelists. Well, I mean, I think the biggest risk is that people will not see the benefit and they will not use it, right? Because having known how much effort went into building the whole thing, and then having no customers using it, that will be a kind of a sad situation. But seriously, I think right now it will be important to kind of educate the customers how to use it safely, so not to fall into those traps that we described. But the other thing, of course, is the value to the customers. So they have to see what's in it for them, and it cannot be without a great user experience and smooth handling of the whole thing. If it turns out I have to spend much more time and much more effort to link my accounts to a third-party provider to get something, then I'll just drop it right after the first try. So I think right now we have launched it. There's not much traffic happening yet. So we'll see how people will start reacting to it in the coming weeks or months, and then I think all the banks will start kind of looking at the overall user experience, how to improve it. Perhaps we should allow app-to-app communication, because mostly banks will be using redirect in Poland, for instance, right? So definitely this is just a start, and we'll see the whole thing evolving and improving. And I think we'll come to a situation where the customers will demand from banks to improve what they have already produced. So it will be no longer a question of the regulators forcing the banks to do it, but the customers will demand a great value from such services.
Yes, definitely. Isn't it transparency to be a value for a customer? That he or she will be able to compare the products offers very easily, that it will be just shown in one app, right?
Well, I mean, you have had such services in the past, right? Here I think it is more about having new things which were not there. I mean, sometimes it's hard to imagine what will come up when you have such a big change, right? Because just like we had the internet, nobody thought of Facebook at that time, right? It was just a source of information, perhaps opening up a web page from a newspaper or something, right? You cannot imagine all the possibilities at the beginning, at the early stage. The same was with smartphones, right? I mean, the first iPhone was it was a closed actually ecosystem. You couldn't download any additional apps. Everything was controlled by Apple. Then it was opened up, and then new things came up, which even Apple didn't think of at the beginning. And the same thing here. I mean, yes, there will be some obvious use cases at the beginning, like account aggregation, or improving the loan process and such thing. But I think in the end, and having also the premium APIs in the picture, we'll see new things coming a bit later. But we have to somehow get there.
Okay, thank you very much for this. Keep your microphone with you, because I have another question for banks. So it's not going to be the whole round, but if you want to add anything, just go for it. So Krzysztof, we will start with you. So we've made it after September 14. We're here. We have Open API platform implemented. I know it wasn't the easiest way, and it paved with a lot of challenges. But what is our next priority? You've touched these things already, saying that monetization, business cases, and so on. But if you could point one or two main focuses, which are the most important right now, would it be improving the platform? As a lot of banks still have a lot of bugs, right? Because we hardly made the deadlines, and I know BNP was the first bank, but I'm sure you have a lot of things to improve as well as we have in all of the other banks, or develop new APIs, so premium APIs to monetize, but by adding APIs that are above PSD2. Or monetize the data as a third-party providers that we are getting from other banks, or maybe to focus on creating the ecosystem around API platform in order to make it more live. Or what would you bet on?
Everything.
Everything in the one.
No, I mean just like.
What are your KPIs?
I mean, you can actually group those things into two main categories. Yes, one is actually producing the offer, the APIs. Yes, and it can be the compliance, improving the whole thing, the developer experience, putting up more APIs, premium APIs, coming up with business proposals for the partners. So that is like one big space which will evolve, and the other one is actually consuming APIs, right? So the banks, all the major banks in Poland, they want to be TPPs. We have already started work on that, and then you will see things coming to the market probably even this month from various banks. But it's not only about the APIs from other banks, it's about kind of plugging into the API ecosystem, right? And looking at what are the other services we could connect with to add value to our customers. Yes, and I think for banking in general, I mean, yes, I mean, we have had banking for a long time. We have traditional products. Of course, we have kind of enhanced the access to your accounts by having internet, mobile applications, a watch which you can pay and such things. But I think then moving further to kind of stand out from the crowd, we have to come up with new things, added value services that will make your customers stay with you or be attracted to you by switching accounts. And this you can do by utilizing APIs, not necessarily from the financial sector, but in general from the API market, because there are now thousands of companies. And I mean, APIs are not a new thing. It's been.
But this is exactly what I wanted to say.
So
we could have done that.
Yeah. So it's a question of like using the capabilities, right? And in the end, if it delivers value to customers, then you have a great solution which will.
I'm looking at
win.
the time, and we need to speed up. And I have still a few questions. So, Konrad, Magda, what are your KPIs in terms of now open API platform?
All we have to do is to agree. I think Krzysztof is talking for all of the banks. And generally, that's true. That's what we are planning to do. We in BNP have a bit easier than some other banks because we have already the API store, the group store that gathers all the APIs from the whole of the group, and we are able to use the synergy effect from within the group. Of course, the most important is what will happen when we go out to the market. We go out to the other APIs, other services, and find the solutions that combines all the possible products within some kind of effect and some kind of other product that we currently cannot even imagine, right? But yes, the summary is that Krzysztof is talking for all of the banks.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to touch, yes, you can take it because it's going to be the question
He's
for
a
you.
bank as well, Raisin Bank. They
Yes,
said, yeah.
of course, and I will have another question for you. But if you want to answer, what's your KPIs in Raisin in concerning the banking as a service, I guess, platform?
No, we have really clear priority, and right now is to pretty much change the core system. So I think APIs are not really top priority number one with us, and the idea is to change the core so we can pretty much build quickly and easily API. Maybe we are one step behind the incumbent banks. So
You're or in front. As a fintech thinking
Let's see.
totally different than a bank, traditional banks with KPIs and MBOs, right? So I have a question to you, Boyan. Since Raisin is all about open banking since the beginning, like you said, not that much has changed for you guys because you've been using open banking. You've been in the open banking since you started. And now you're present in how many? 24 countries?
basically 31. So we have platforms dedicated in 7 markets, but we cover each and every European Union member and also all European Economic Area members, so 31 markets overall.
Okay. So basing on this experience, what would you say about the differences between countries, regions? What is the how are the different markets adopting open banking idea and solutions? Which markets do you find the most prominent, the most advanced in open banking thinking, and which one are still, you know, thinking what to think about this?
Well, I wouldn't really differentiate that much geographically. The trend I see pretty much is that. So the good news, another good news is that finally banks love to talk about open banking, see something for them there. But in our case, the open banking discussions are quite often driven by a specific business case, which is either we need something, so banks need something in terms of funding, or more and more they would like to pretty much give their customers better experience, better value for the money, and really access to many offers. But make no mistake, it's not because anybody loves open banking, it's because it's a clear business case. Few words about it. Let's say if you're a big incumbent bank, maybe like an Alior or other banks, having too much funds right now is a pain point. So they're starting, so there's a clear business case how if banks pretty much reduce excess liquidity, they can make more money, and of course everybody likes that. So when you have a clear business case to add it to the open banking concept, I think this is like the win-win situations. Otherwise, just open banking, we haven't seen it fly like that for like 5-6 years already. And speaking, who are the front runners, who are the laggards? I think the front runners, I see 2 cases here. So first one, basically the banks that are built ground up with the idea to be a marketplace or an open banking platform. These are usually the challenger banks. In our case, like in Germany, N26, also Fidor to some extent. Also the UK players, which might not be EU players soon, but still like Starlink, like Revolut. I think these banks are really embracing and trying to monetize as much as possible their huge customer bases. On the second hand, I think incumbents, big incumbents, are finally also moving into this direction. Indication of this is our Commerzbank project, but also other big banks across Europe are starting to see that there might be benefit for them. So kind of find the business case necessary to develop maybe additional APIs, connect to our API to offload liquidity. And maybe also just to wrap up, because we discussed a lot about infrastructure, ecosystem. Actually, the biggest advantage for the customer is usually not when each and every bank does something itself or creates the best API for its own customers. But what I see quite often, for example, in the Nordics, they have this like bank AI ID, which is super cool feature, which was built by consortium of banks. So pretty much helps the pain point of how to onboard the customer, identify the customer. So really, I really enjoy the Bartosz idea of really banks building stuff together, and not everybody does its own thing. So I think the future winners will be the banks that know how to cooperate with banks, not only with fintechs, by the way.
True. I would add to that the regulator thing, that there are differences, even though it's all a European Union, it's still, I find, totally different attitude, or maybe attitude is not a good word, but a totally different way of thinking of our regulator, which is one of the toughest one, I would say, in Europe, comparing to the Germany, right, and Romania and so on.
Everybody says this about the regulator, by the way. Everybody thinks
everybody wants to
his
blame
regulator
someone.
is the worst regulator and the toughest. No, make no mistake, there is no like single European market as of today. It's very different in terms of customer onboarding. Every regulator has discretion on the compliance requirements, KYC requirements. Then on top of this, when you say how you can really work with the bank with regards to interface, it's hard. There is no like single deposit protection even. Like it's really, really different segregated small markets across Europe. And actually having one single market would benefit, I think, everybody, because you probably be able to sell offers or products to German parents, which is, I guess, quite hard, not impossible, to really hard these days.
It is. I just have a technical question. Does it include the Q&A session, or it's only the Q&A session? Oh, okay. Q&A session. Okay. All right. Okay, let's switch to our audience. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and we'll provide you with a microphone. Do you want to ask anything? Our guests, here's one question. Yeah, here's one question. And there's another one.
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you for a great panel, really interesting. I'm curious to know, what's the most interesting and innovative example you've seen so far of open banking?
Great question. Who wants to share? Everyone is thinking. I can point someone.
Okay. I mean, it's not like I have experiences myself, but perhaps not a ready solution, right? Because the ones that have appeared, at least even in the UK, where they had an earlier start because they had their own regulations effective last year in January. I mean, it started off with the simple things, account aggregation, right? I mean, even though the biggest banks, HSBC, for instance, right, Barclays, they put out their apps, whether it was standalone or embedded in their existing app. Okay, aggregate your accounts into one single place, right? And the reason why banks want to do it is, of course, convenience. I mean, if you love the user experience of the app of the bank, then it's fine because you have everything in one single place. But having access to the full portfolio of the customer, they are able to provide more accurate offers, for instance, right? So that's why for banks it's a good business to have everything in one place. But I think like of course, yes, we have seen it in payments, but I think in Poland, because we have had Pay by Link for such a long time, having PIS services, it's not such a big deal. It is perhaps a bigger deal for the aggregators because it's free, so they can plug into the banks and provide it for free. But the customers have been using the possibility to pay directly from their accounts for a long time in Poland. It hasn't been so obvious in other countries. Of course, not everywhere. Somewhere it was, but as such, I think that isn't such a big revolution here, at least here in Poland. Yeah, I mean, to me, what is interesting, because I'm trying to observe it from the other side, how banks are approaching it, and I've seen some interesting initiatives. I mean, BBVA has been in the open banking APIs space for quite some time, working on building the ecosystem with partners. I think Nordea is doing quite a good job in the Scandinavian countries. DBS in Singapore, they launched, I think it was almost 2 years ago, they launched a portal with already a dozen of different services and with specific examples, which they showed to the developers. Okay, so this is a use case, perhaps build something on top of that. I mean, involve it and try to work with us. So those are the examples from the other side, and from the consumer side. I mean, I haven't seen anything like groundbreaking yet, but like I said, it's the early stage, and then we still have to wait. And also just one thing, and I think that the direction that some of the banks are taking, for instance, Deutsche Bank in Germany, where they have like a market-based place for the business customers, where they highlight some solutions built by the partners. I think that's also quite a good approach.
Let me clarify one thing. You said interesting, not useful, right? Okay.
And innovative.
As for, innovative or interesting. As for interesting solutions, I saw a few years ago within the Open Bank project from Great Britain, example of solution that could generate music based on your history of account data on your banking data. So it was curious because it showed that there are really no limits. The limit is your imagination. You have the data, you can do everything with it, even generate music.
Yeah, I've heard of an example. I don't know if it's a real one or if it was just like a joke. But if you combine your account data with your dating app, and then you will see exactly who that person is, because you will see how they spend the money and whether that person is a match or not, for instance.
So Tinder might be our new
Tinder
partnership.
with PSD2, yes, that will be the big weapon. Yes.
Have they applied for TPP?
Not really, but they can use our license, right?
Oh, yeah.
I would love to see compliance taking a look on this idea.
Why not? Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, the gentleman there. Okay. Yeah.
Hello, I have a question to the banks, basically. Are they enjoying implementing open APIs and open banking, basically, or this is, purely regulatory thing for them? Are they happy that they have to do it? And the second question is, what do you think, how would the competition look like between the banks in the moment when all the banks will be connected? Thanks.
Please express your feeling about implementing.
Is it a personal question, or you mean the whole bank as a bank?
Strategical question.
Strategical. I mean, if you look at the strategy of Alior Bank from 2017, it already had the open banking embedded, right? Not only as a regulatory thing, but also as a business possibility. Yeah, and looking at the whole thing, including IT and such things. So I mean, from early on, we wanted to kind of jump into that space. I mean, of course, I mean, do you enjoy it? It was a big project, right? So it required a lot of people to be involved. It required a lot of resources, which could be normally utilized for something else, right? But I think now having the platform, having the knowledge after 2 years, right? I think at the conference somebody said that they've been working with open banking for 10 years, because they count 1 year as 5 years, right? Because you have to learn so much, you have to do so many things, and involve so many people, that this was a very, very challenging time, but I think in the end, I mean, me personally, I mean, I know some colleagues from the business, they were not too happy because they have to share, they have to give things to others for free. But from my perspective, it was interesting to like jump into that space and also look for opportunities, not only the compliance part, and seeing how people start to think in that direction, start to understand what it is all about, start to understand what is the difference between SPSP and TPP, and then even seeing ideas generated by the business, which 2 years ago didn't have a clue what PSD2 is all about. So this has been interesting, and I think the fun part will start very soon.
I personally do really enjoy the implementation of open banking. It gives you opportunities to really meet a lot of people, a lot of institutions, to know a lot of different solutions from different markets. It is really something, I will say, fun to do. If you like this kind of job, really. As for the cooperation between banks, the only thing that will change is the platform, really. The banks are competition, and they will be competitive with each other. The only thing that will change is how they communicate with clients, that the communication will go through another external parties. But the solutions will have to be competitive to remain on the market and be top quality.
Can I add to that?
Yeah,
No,
I want to.
I wouldn't agree with this part. I mean, not fully, but partially, because I mean, for instance, Polish API standard. We had people from different banks sitting together, and from TPPs and from other companies sitting together and finding a way to define the standard so that it works for all the banks, right? So it was an opportunity for the banks to work together. It seldom happens that the banks cooperate, and for me, coming up with the Polish API standard was such an opportunity. And we have also made, let's say, API friends, which we sometimes called up and ask about how they approach such a thing, because it wasn't clear from the regulations. There were no specific description of how to implement certain functionality. So it kind of made the banks cooperate in a way, because they were like in the same situation. They all had to comply. So that from that perspective, it made banks more like a community. And in the future, I mean, even now, when we are plugging into APIs from other banks, we have to also work together, right? And we know how challenging it was to put up the APIs, so we sometimes even kind of help each other and suggest what they should fix and such things. So to me, that's kind of a new approach. Of course, they will have to compete on the product side and such things, but at least I feel that there's like even a community being built between banks in the open banking space.
Well, yes, that's true, but products will remain products,
yeah,
and customer is customer of each of the bank, and I guess the competition will remain, but the great value is that we started cooperating on another level, not on the product level, on more technical, on the API level. Yes, that's true, and that's it.
I would add to that, because I'm also from the bank, that in terms of competition, the other area of competing with each other would be finding new distribution channels through APIs, where we can actually monetize the APIs, and announcing a big new partnerships, or actually, because we were focused mostly on implementing the value-added services and the new features inside the banking apps, but there is also another way of using APIs to find at different places. That's the strategy of DBS, if I'm not mistaken, that the bank is less visible, but it's still there, and it's finding a new distribution channels and new places where we can sell our products without saying that it's Alior's, BNP, or any other bank, right? But we monetize them.
Yeah, I mean, DBS has a motto. I think it says, "Bank less, live more."
Yes.
That is what they promote right now.
Exactly. Any other questions from the audience? There is one. Last one. Okay, that's the last one.
Hi. It's maybe not a question, but it's a comment on what Bartosz expressed. That dear fintech, don't forget about your customer, because customer is the most valuable what you have, and without customer there is no business. That is everybody knows. But regarding the cooperation between fintechs, startups, and banks. This is the most valuable what bank can offer us. I think that Kamila understands me perfectly, that fintech sometimes, or any startup, maybe that the institution can have money, can have funding, but access to customers is very difficult for such an organization. So the most important and the most valuable for the cooperation between fintechs and banks can be, it's ask your customer what and face our ideas with your experience and with your customers.
Yes, you're relating to. We are now asking our customers about the product that we are now working on
yes.
together. It's Mariusz from our startup that is taking part in the acceleration program. Okay, so I think that's it. Although I had a few more questions, but maybe there will be another chance. I guess I will. Maybe I will thank to everyone for taking part in this debate. I will try not to mix any last name, so I'll get my help. Although I remember, I promise. Yes. Yes, it's here. Yeah, okay, I prefer mine. So thank you very much, Magdalena Pośnik and Konrad Szermanowicz, from BNP Paribas. Thank you very much to Bartosz Sawicki from The Heart. Thank you very much, Sergey Kravchenko from System Technologies. Thank you very much, Boyan Byanov from Raisin. And thank you, what's your name? Okay, Krzysztof Grzeszczuk from Alior Bank. Thank you very much, and thank you guys.